I'm seeing things that aren't real. I'm seeing... I'm seeing things that aren't real. I'm seeing things I shouldn't see. I'm dreaming things I've never seen.
You're beginning to think in images, concrete images. Hot, cold, light, dark, food, hunger, pain. I think as I always did. Words are becoming meaningless to me, except for the most elementary command. No! See, it's happening already. No! 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 Lost control.
Whatever it is that you believe you're seeing, it's not real.
Seeing things before they happen.
Things are not always what they seem in this place. So you can't take anything for granted.
I am escaping certain unnamed realities that plague my life here. When I stop going there, I will be well, be well. Are you also divergent, friend?
Do I look insane? I know I had a mental breakdown, and I know it looks to you as if the same thing's happening again, but it isn't. I'm sure it is. I didn't tell you before because I wasn't sure whether it was real or not, but I am sure now. It is real.
Is this real or is this one of my delusions?
This is different. Mom, hey, all of these nuts could just make phone calls. They could spread insanity oozing through telephone cables, oozing to the ears of all these poor, sane people, infecting them. Wackos everywhere, plague of man.
Well, alrighty then, I'm back. It might look exactly like the same setup that I did 30 seconds ago when I finished the Q&A. And you'd be right. I cleared up the clutter, but I am banging out films right now like a cheap budget production line. This is the first in yet another series, a long and rambling series called Anatomy of a Portrait. I think I had Anatomy of something else a few weeks ago. I'm supposed to put these into playlists, right? On YouTube. I'm supposed to like categorize them so that when you see the playlist, you can just deep dive into all of those. If I had time and I was smart and I was a professional, I would do that. Here was my idea behind this whole series and why this first episode is not what I originally envisioned it would be. Portraiture to me, after giving it a hard think for at least 90 seconds, I said, you know what? Portraiture is a pretty magical mechanism as a building block for virtually any other kind of photography that you want to do. Because even something like tabletop product, you're still photographing an object, whether it's a human, a piece of tabletop food, artwork, whatever. I think portraiture is a great gateway, especially if you're going to become a doc photographer. If you're going to shoot documentary work, inevitably you're going to run into the fact that you're going to either get assigned to make portraits, you're going to have to make portraits, you're going to want to make portraits, and this is a psychological game. My original intention was to show you the intro that I just showed you, then break down a specific portrait shoot, showing you the image that I think is the single best, and then showing some of the periphery images that I used to get to that final image. But I realized there was something I needed to explain prior to that, which is sort of the prep side of this whole thing. I think it's preparation, execution, and extraction. That's typically what happens with a portrait. You're getting in, you're preparing yourself and them for what's about to transpire. You're making the portraits, and then you're getting out. And that is the skill of portraiture. But I needed to explain, and I've got 11 things. 11, and that's completely tricky hipstery YouTube crap, but I just happen to end up with 11 things that I think that you're going to want to know prior to this. Number one is, what kind of portraits do I do? I am not a studio photographer. I'm not in a controlled environment. I've done that. I can do that. I just don't enjoy it that much. I'm not someone who carts lights into the field anymore. I don't do that. I sold all my lighting. What I am doing is called location portraiture, or location environmental portraiture, which is putting someone in their natural environment and then making portraits of them. A portrait to me can be a variety of things. Some of the images in that intro were what I would call real-time portraits without any orchestration whatsoever. Those are environmental portraits. The second image was of a guy behind panes of broken glass and he's out of focus in the background. Some people may look at that and think, well, that's not a portrait, I can't see his face. Doesn't matter, that's his environment. You can see his body. You get the general idea what he looks like. I don't need to see someone's face for it to be a portrait. They don't have to be in focus for it to be a portrait. It's an idea, a feeling is what a portrait can be. So I shoot on location portrait and environmental portraits. Most of the time now, I don't do assignments anymore. If someone called me today to do a portrait assignment, I would tell them, hang on a minute, and I would call the photographer I ran into last night here in Santa Fe, and I would call them, see if they're available, and I would give that assignment away. I don't want to do assignments anymore. So most of the time when I do portraits now, it's because I've called someone up and I've said, I want to do an audio interview with you, and I also want to make a portrait. And so it's from something I call my dispatches series on my website, where I do audio interviews. And then at the end of that audio interview, I will do a portrait. That's just for fun, it's just for me. But there's a whole twisted little game I play with myself that I'm going to get to in a minute. But I wanted to classify the kind of portrait. So if you're a studio portrait photographer, some of these things are not going to apply to you. Number 2 is know your subject, if possible. Sometimes you're going to get assignments and you're going to get them last minute, and you're going to show up to photograph people that you know virtually nothing about. And then you're a little bit behind the 8 ball. But if you have time to do research on someone, having a little window into who they are will help with the psychology when it comes time to actually press the button and make the portraits. Number 3, you've got to simplify your kit. Know before you go what you're going to work with. So clients, especially people who are not necessarily thrilled to be having their picture taken, don't have a lot of patience and time for geeky photographers who have too much equipment, who are fumbling around with their gear and not making portraits. Remember, get in, get out, get away, get the check, get crazy, get famous, get wild, hit rock bottom, and then come back. That's my general life plan for you. But simplify your kit. 99% of the dispatch portraits that you see on my website were shot with a Hasselblad with an 80 mil. Hasselblad 80 mil, Hasselblad 80 mil. Now, the cool thing about that kit is not only is it simple, it is old. And so a lot of times, modern people, when they see that camera, they don't know what it is exactly, but they know it's old. This is a talking point. This is cool. This is fun for them. This helps relax them. This helps them feel like this is something different and unique that's happening. Secondary part of that kit, it's a waist level finder. I'm shooting like this. I'm not shooting like this with a giant 80 to 200 that looks like a howitzer. I'm not even looking at them. I'm looking away. I can get right up on top of people with a waist level finder, and because I'm not doing this, they're not paying attention. They're relaxed. I've shot portraits with a Hasselblad and an 80 where the person said after seeing the negatives, I had no idea you were there. And I am 3 feet away, like this, because I'm not looking at them. So that was the kit that worked for me. Whatever your kit is, streamline it, get it done. Number 4, the second you walk in, start looking for usable light. This is something that if you shoot portraits long enough, this is a curse that you will never be able to stop, and it is annoying as hell. I'm sitting here right now, and I'm staring into this camera, and I'm looking at that red light, and I'm talking into this camera, but my head is looking around, and I'm looking at places that have usable light that I could shoot portraits. This happens when I'm in the airport. This happens when I'm in a car. This happens when I'm in a hotel. I'm constantly looking around, I could make a picture there, I could make a picture there. The second you walk into that environment where you're gonna photograph someone, you need to be looking for plan A, plan B, plan C, looking for usable light. So when it comes time to say, okay, let's get this done, you're quick and efficient. You're not wandering around, giving them time to start overthinking. Where can I make it? Plan A, plan B, plan C. Point number 5, talk and set the table. You've got to engage. And this is what I love about portraiture and about documentary work that deals with photographing people, is this separates the men from the boys. This separates, to me, people who are posing as photographers and those who can actually do it, because we are intangible. Humans throw in an unpredictability to photography that cannot be replicated with any other subject. And it can be defeating and crushing and demoralizing. And it can also be the most rewarding thing you can possibly imagine. So you've got to talk. And here's where it gets interesting. Male to female or female to male tends to be easier. For some reason, you can walk in, and if the person you're photographing is a female and I'm a male photographer, in my experience, that's the only gender I have experience with, is being a male and photographing both fellow males and females, there's a different dynamic. And I've often found it easier to photograph female subjects than I have male subjects. Males tend to get a little bristly, especially when you get up into, like, let's say you get hired to photograph certain CEO of some company. This is a guy who doesn't really want to be photographed. He's got an ego. He's on a clock. He finds you annoying. That's a tricky scenario to be in, and I've been in that a million times. Anyone who's been a newspaper photographer, editorial photographer, that shot any kind of on-assignment work, your commercial work, chances are you've photographed a lot of people where you might have been promised 5 minutes and you get there and the guy goes, you got 30 seconds. I've photographed professional athletes, nightmare. Baseball, football, basketball, golf, they were terrible people to be around. I would never wish this on anyone else. They didn't like my setups, they didn't like me, they told me to F off. It was just a horrible scenario. You still have to be able to perform, and that comes from dialogue. That goes back to point 2, knowing your subject, knowing a little bit about them to crack the door open. Yes, this CEO can't stand me, but I know that we have a shared interest in X. You bring that up, he's somehow like intrigued. That's buying you time to look around, find the location. So you've got to be prepared to talk. Number 6, yeah, I love doing this. Number 6 is acknowledge that there is nothing natural about what you are doing. It is damn ridiculous, to use a John Wayne expression. I didn't use the whole thing, but you know what I mean. This is getting to be goddamn ridiculous. That was a famous John Wayne quote. I acknowledge the fact that what we are doing, the photographer to subject portrait experience, especially if I don't know you and you don't know me, there is nothing natural about it. For a lot of people to be on the other side of the other side of the camera, the business end of that camera, they are terrified, mortified, petrified, and something else-fied. They don't want to be there. It's horrible. And then you're like, oh, here's my 70 to 200 2.8 with a giant lens hood and a motor drive. Act natural. It doesn't work. It's not. And so when you acknowledge it and go, look, what we're about to do is it's gonna suck for a couple of seconds. They will, my experience, they will laugh and appreciate the fact that you are acknowledging this. And this is where the talk rolls in. And this is, I'm merging points 5, 6, and 7. Talk to set the table. Acknowledge, point 6 is acknowledge that there's nothing natural about the process. And point number 7 is one of the tricks that I've used with people, is to say, this is your time to act. I want you to act. And I'm only asking you to do this for a very brief amount of time. And what I tell them is, I know that when you look in the mirror, you see somebody staring back that you know better than any of us, right? I can't know that person, but that person in the mirror staring back at you thinks that they have a good side and a bad side. They have a way that they think they look good, in other ways that they don't. They have things that they're proud of and things that they're embarrassed by. I said, that's the person I want. I want the person who's looking in the mirror and saying, today I feel good. Today I know I have a good side. Today I'm going to own this. I'm going to do well here. And when you empower them to tap into that aspect of their character, you will get different people. You will get the person you are after as a portrait photographer. Avedon was famous for raking people over the coals and getting them to the breaking point before he made pictures. He broke them down. And some people are like, oh, that must have been cruel. No, he's getting to the essence of who that person was. And that was through talk. And I was never around him on a portrait shoot. I've heard stories, but I understand that. And that's what you're doing. So this point 7 was, this is your time to act. And I found, especially with those portrait clients that I don't know, that I'm trying to get them to participate, not relax. I'm getting them to participate with me. Point number 8, I told you before that when I do these audio interviews and I do a portrait afterwards, I play this sick game with myself for no reason. And the game is 4 setups, 1 roll of film, less than 5 minutes. So as I'm doing the interview and I'm looking at them like I'm looking at you right now, and they're mic'd up and I'm asking questions and we're talking, I'm also looking around the room at where I'm going to make these portraits. And I say to myself, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, there's 4. Then when we're done with one roll of 12 exposures in a Hasselblad, I want 4 different portraits on one roll in less than 5 minutes. And I'm done, and I walk out. When you do a portrait in less than 5 minutes, there's a sense of relief most of the time from the person that you're photographing, an overwhelming sense of relief. And it makes them realize you know exactly what you're doing and you know exactly what you want and that you got what you wanted. So that's point number 8. Point number 9, which flips point number 8 on its head. If you're not like me and you don't play these idiotic twisted games for no reason, the more time you have with someone, chances are the better the portrait is going to be. There's no substitute for time and access. You've heard me say that over and over again. I think that's true on a portrait as well. You can overdo it. You can spend God, I've been assisting on portrait shoots that were just agonizing. They just went on forever. And this was back in the day of Polaroids. You know, you pull a Polaroid as an assistant, you're like this. 90 seconds. Nope, we're a quarter stop off. Another Polaroid, and you're like, I hate my life. I made bad decisions. I should have worked, I got a different job. I should have studied business. Yeah, question everything. Typically, but if you have more time, the better. Number 10 is critical for anyone making portraits with a digital camera. Do all caps. This is all caps. Point number, I guess this is point 10. 9 was the more time, the better. 10, do not chimp. Do not chimp on the back of that digital camera. And if for chimping is this, making a picture and then staring at the back of your camera and flipping through it. For the love of God, do not do this. When digital first arrived, I saw photographers doing this at trade shows, and I would watch them model. And these geek photographers would be shooting, and I've seen this on location a zillion times, shooting with a digital camera, and the second that you break contact with that subject, and you start looking at the back of the camera and pressing buttons, you can physically watch that person transform. They want no part of you. It is maddening. It breaks any kind of contact and association and temporary relationship that you have with that person. It is gone the second you start chimping. One of the benefits of film, can't chimp, can't see it. All you're doing is talking, shooting, looking. That's why one of the reasons I love film. Digital is a trap if you let it be. And this is something I've seen over and over and over again. You cannot, under any circumstances, do that. With digital, it's your Polaroid. You shoot one, you make sure your exposure is right, and you engage with that person, and you shoot and shoot and shoot, and you do not stop and look at the back of the camera until you're done. If your assistant is there, if you're tethered, they can check the laptop and make sure that there's no technical issues, but you never stop and chimp. Trust me, that point alone was worth at least 99 cents. Last point, relax. Just relax. Relax, people. Tranquilo. Just take it down a notch. You are in control. You are the photographer. You want to be confident, not cocky. Nobody likes a cocky photographer, regardless of what it may appear like. Regardless of if you see some cocky jerk that's getting PR or press somewhere, no one wants to be around that person. I mentioned this a few weeks ago. The day you can't be a jerk and still get work. The days where someone could be just a tyrant and still get work in photography, I think those days are numbered because there's too many people who can produce content. And content is what most clients are looking for. They're not looking for photography, they're looking for content, and pretty much anyone can produce that. So you want to be confident in what you're doing, but not cocky. And also realize that as a creative, even some of these CEOs who are incredibly successful in their field, they will sometimes not verbalize this to you, but there will be an appreciation for you as a creative. They are intrigued, at least a little bit, as to what your life process work is about. That comes from being confident in front of them, funny, humorous, up to date, able to talk about way more than nuts and bolts and shutter speeds and apertures. None of these people will care about any of that at all. They don't care about the cameras you're using unless it's some ancient thing that may intrigue them. But just be confident in what you're doing. If you're at that level, you just have to own what you're doing and realize that you're not always going to walk away with a great portrait. Sometimes the ingredients are not there. Sometimes you're going to have a bad day. None of us can produce 100% every single day, regardless of what you see and hear online. That is all BS. We all have good days and bad days. And some subjects are just really hard to crack. There have been certain people I've photographed over and over and still feel like I don't really have a great portrait of them. And then there's other people that I literally have 2 frames of, and one of them could potentially be one of my favorite portraits I've ever made. It's the luck of the draw. That's one of the beauties of photography, is that it's completely unpredictable when you throw the human element into the mix, and that's why we like to do it. So I hope this was helpful as sort of a table setter for portraiture in general. The next time I come back with this series, it will be breaking down a portrait shoot, probably a single roll of film, and showing you the images that I think worked and those that didn't, and what I think is the single best image from that shoot. I've got 40 or 50 of those shoots that I can pull from, and I think that might be useful to people, or maybe not. Maybe I still haven't learned anything like my guidance counselor said. I didn't think I even had a guidance counselor. I think I went to school before there was any sort of planning for anyone. I'll put it this way. I graduated from high school and I had not sent one, what do you even send to a college? Transcripts? Hadn't sent any. Hadn't even thought about it. There was no planning. It's not like now where you're in kindergarten and you're like Ivan Drago. They've got you hooked up to apparatuses and they're testing your heart rate and they're like, you're going to be good at Cornell when you're 30 years from now. No, it wasn't like that. So anyway, I'm rambling now because I can. Hope that's helpful, and I will be back with another episode.